So we're going to review 3 of the top lifts that went down in this weekend's CrossFit Games semi-final event, where they had to do an 800-meter run and then in a 6-minute window hit a max snatch. And the first lift I wanted to review was Jake Douglas, who set Torian alight over the weekend, punched himself a games ticket and snatched 140 kilos in this event, which is crazy. One thing I want you to notice is straight away, this guy is so muscular, so built, and when he initiates the movement, when he comes from the floor, his back is a little bit rounded and there's a hell of a lot of tension here in the arms when he's initiating this movement, which means it makes him a little bit difficult for him to use his legs as well as he could in this initial phase from the floor. Now, when the bar's getting to the knee, becomes even more evident now, where the legs have got quite straight, the load is getting taken predominantly in the back and in the upper body, but because he is so strong, he gets away with this through the middle phase of the lift, where his arms bend and he pulls the bar back into his center of gravity before he strikes up. Now, like I said, this 140 kilos is still a massive snatch, but if we were to slightly improve this, what we'd be working on in the initial phase of the lift is trying to get him to use his legs a little bit better. What would then happen is, as this bar comes past the knees at this phase, what we wouldn't see is as much of a gap happening here. The arms would be able to hang a little bit looser through this middle phase of the lift, and I think we'd see even more height then on the bar at this top phase of the lift. But he's got absolutely incredible mobility, so he moves nicely into his receiving position here, which is absolutely incredible. One thing I also want you to notice is how good his lockout is in his overhead. Now, his grip is actually looks a little bit narrow because of the distance between his head and the bar, but always remember, the closer the grip is, the more stability and strength you're going to have in the overhead, and this works really nicely for him. So absolutely incredible lift all in all. Just a little bit more use of the legs and I think would be dangerous, and definitely see him snatch over 150. So well done, brother, and congratulations on making it to the games. Next lift that we're going to be taking a look at is Guy. Now, this is one of Brazilian's finest men in the game, and obviously is well known for how good he is at Olympic lifting. So we've seen before, when Guy initiates a movement from the floor, he really uses his legs quite well in the first phase of the lift. And this is something, like you said, the difference in the start position between Guy and Jake is quite different. You'll see how his chest is a lot more upright in this setup position, which allows him to utilize the legs really well through this middle phase of the lift. Now, one thing that I always notice with Guy is he has this little twist of the foot when he comes into his extension. You'll see the heels kind of pop in through his extension. I think you'd probably benefit from turning the toes out a little bit more in the first phase of the lift and almost thinking about spreading the floor to create that tension in the first phase. But as always with Guy, always really good extension here at the top of the lift. His eyes and his chest is pointing forward, which makes it nice and easy when he moves underneath the bar to sit upright. And this is key when we're in this position. Sitting upright allows us to stay externally rotated with the shoulders, which we can see here, the lats engage, and of course achieve a really solid lockout position. I want you to also notice the wrist position when he's overhead. He's letting the wrist sit back as well, which means that as he comes to stand out of this snatch, he can load the legs really well. And again, this is a very comfortable weight for this man to be hitting. Now we're going to move on to the final and arguably the most impressive lift that we saw went down this weekend at the semi-finals. Now this man is Tudor Magna. He's hit a 325-pound snatch, which is absolutely incredible in this year's semi-finals. Now, he's not the biggest bloke at all. If you looked at him, you'd be like, there's no way this guy's snatching that much weight. But as you can see, this just goes to show how important technique is when it comes to lifting these heavier weights in the snatch. Now, one thing I want you to really notice about this lift, which I really like, is kind of the discipline that happens here in this setup position. So you'll see that the shoulders are nicely above the bar here, the legs are well loaded, the back's in a neutral position when he initiates the lift. And as we progress through here, you'll see as the bar gets to knee height, here, the backs maintain that same angle, which is really important. Back position at the start, back position when the bar gets to knee. If that's the same, you're gonna make sure you use your legs really well then in this second phase, which is why we see now the legs really nicely coming into play during this phase of the lift. What you'll also notice is, because of how well balanced he is in that first phase from the floor, the bar is now hanging loosely. It's touching the legs here, which is great, and the arms are hanging relatively loose. This means that when he comes through to this second phase of the lift, he's able to hit a really good extension position. One thing that you do notice though is the legs don't quite lock out as much as you probably want to see during this phase of the lift. I normally like to see that there's kind of like a straight line running through ankle, whoop, ankle, knee, hip, and shoulder. He kind of moves a little bit back behind the bar during this phase of the lift, which is why we see a hop back happening here with the feet. Whoop, there into his receiving position. And you'll also notice the difference then between where the bar is overhead and where his head is. Super close between these two comparison to a couple of the other athletes that we looked at. Mobility is incredible though. That's why he's able to be so efficient into this receiving position. Looking at maximal bar height, even though, like I said, this could be better. If you look at where this bar is from here to where it is when he receives, it's almost bang on the same line. So he's lifting right about on his limit at this stage. A couple of things that I would work on personally is through the middle phase of lift, actually thinking about not letting the shoulders throw back and letting the legs extend a little bit better through the middle. Also, you can see the knees collapse in a little bit in this catch position. Thinking about keeping the knees out a little bit more in the receiving position will help him create a little bit more tension in the catch and will prevent this bum lifting early when he comes to stand out. Here, if we look here, bum's kind of lifting up early as he stands out. This puts a lot of excessive pressure on the shoulder and the elbow, which we probably want to avoid. But again, this is a submaximal lift, so I don't want to be too critical. I just know that there's going to be a big difference for him if he's able to use his legs standing up a little bit better, because that's going to avoid what's happening here with the shoulder, where we're internally rotated now, putting a lot of pressure on shoulder and elbow. Then he externally rotates into the correct position when he's overhead. So if we can keep this good position here in the receive position and get him to use his legs to stand up out the hole, I think it'll be in a really good place. Overall, some cracking lifts by those three lads. Incredible technique, and the overall standard of the snatching just keeps getting better and better. And I'd love to see it. I hope that was helpful. I hope you like looking through them with me.